The Dream. It's one of the richest races of the dirt late model season. Held at Eldora Speedway, this annual summer showcase has drivers from across the country battling on the dirt high banks for a cash prize of over $100,000. But before the high stakes of the Dream was the Prelude, a more laxed event held days before the Dream, where some of the most talented professional racers in America would come together to race for charity.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Flashback to the Track. James, that intro was straight baller. Yes, today we are talking about the Prelude to the Dream, which is a very interesting dirt race. James, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. It's quarantine dreams, you know what I mean? So why not watch the Prelude to the quarantine dreams?
If you can find them on YouTube. Only a couple are on there.
Yeah,
the rest is pulled together from stat sheets and our memories.
I wonder who has VHS copies of these pay-per-views, because that person's sitting on a gold mine right now.
And if you have downloads of these, my God, you were sitting on a gold mine. But the Prelude to the Dream was a very interesting dirt race. It was unlike other dirt races as it featured celebrities and, you could say celebrities of NASCAR, the all-stars of NASCAR. Tony Stewart's buddies, Cup Series drivers, a few outliers, Ron Capps from NHRA, all kinds of different guys coming together to raise some money for charity. So, which is always important. I love when people use their platform and they use it for good, which is great. So the Prelude to the Dream was a really cool idea. And how long did it last? 7 years? 8 years?
8 years. There was 8 races. And probably one of the more interesting kind of concepts for a charity race. It's technically an exhibition race to put it into a category. So, to use a platform like Tony Stewart did, who is basically the brainchild of this whole event, I think, unless, someone else can prove us wrong, which we'd love more information about this race. But he held it at his track, Eldora Speedway. He used his good friends to, come up with this great concept to have a race before one of the biggest races of the year for dirt late model racing. So I think it's like a win-win because obviously this race produces a lot of money, but also it produces a lot of great exposure to dirt late model racing with other, drivers from different, avenues of motorsport that can use their fans and their platform to, take a look at dirt late model racing. So it's like a total win for everybody involved. I think probably the coolest thing, if you ever look back at it and figure it out, is that a lot of these cars are rentals. That's probably one of the craziest thing about this race. The cars used in this race most of them are cars that will be raced later that week in this big race, the Dream. So can you imagine if you're going to that to Eldora for the Dream and you're say, oh, I'm going to give my car to Matt Kenseth to run in the Prelude, and Matt Kenseth better not wad up my car so I can go race it in the Dream. It's kind of crazy to think that this race brings that out in these competitors too.
Yeah, and a lot of it was the same type of team owners who would lend these cars. Scott Bloomquist built a lot of the cars for these guys to run. And I'm trying to think of who some of the other owners were that offered up cars. But it was just cool how they brought attention back to the roots of dirt racing, which I thought was really cool because you could do anything. You could do you look at Denny Hamlin Short Track Showdown. They could have gone to a short track, right? They could have said, we're going to go to Five Flags or we're going to go to South Boston and we're going to have a charity race. But to decide to do a dirt race, I think is really cool because a lot of guys grew up racing on dirt, and a lot of guys have a lot of experience on dirt. Or guys went to dirt later in life. Guys like Kenny Wallace went to dirt very late in life. Ken Schrader. Then they had Dave Blaney, who's obviously a World of Outlaws champion. Check out my new video on Dave Blaney on our channel. But he was a World of Outlaws champion, a USAC champion. Obviously, Tony Stewart has done boatloads of dirt racing. He owns Eldora Speedway. So cool to just bring everybody together. And the best part is when they bring guys in who have never raced on dirt before and they just have an absolute blast. They don't care where they finish. It's all for charity. It's not about where you finish. So it was just a really cool event, and I enjoyed watching it. I think I watched it in 07 and I think 08, 09. I think I watched the first 3. I remember specifically watching. So yeah, it was a cool event and for a great cause. So
yeah, I don't remember exactly where I was able to watch them, but I was able to watch.
I remember watching the 07 one, but it was apparently an HBO pay-per-view. But I don't remember. I thought I watched it on Speed Channel. I could have swore I watched it on Speed Channel. Like I can't.
Maybe Speed re-aired it, and we were able to like block out who won, and then we were able to enjoy the race. But I think that's the other cool aspect about this. Like really, the only pressure I feel like in this race is if you have dirt late model or dirt experience, because then you're supposed to be good at driving these cars because I guess you have some kind of experience, and we say that loosely because this is what the announcers kind of make it out to be. But honestly, we understand that these are very hard cars to drive. I'm pretty sure iRacing can only put some kind of level of realism to driving a real race car, but driving the dirt late models in iRacing is probably one of the hardest driving cars in the game, in my opinion. You're constantly working. It's such a big car too, and you have a lot to work with. And then you always have to constantly go into the corner and just blindly go up to that wall where it's the fastest part of the track and just go fast. And you take like a lot of these new guys, and then throw them into a car that's not theirs and go fast. Well, I think it's kind of fun, but at least it was for a good cause and there's no pressure. And I feel like that's what just made it more of an enjoyable event, was just no pressure. It's just all for charity.
Yeah, and we mentioned, or James mentioned, guys borrowing cars from other people, but there were a lot of people who own their own cars. There are lots of guys who have their own dirt late model teams. Ken Schrader, Kenny Wallace, lots of guys have their own cars. They build their own cars, bring them. So it was kind of cool for them to be like owner drivers in the race. But as James mentioned, so the Prelude to the Dream is just that. It's the Prelude to the Dream, which is this massive dirt late model event every June since 1994. And you get $100,000 to win. So it's like the highest paying dirt late model race in the world. And the 2019, I guess you have the 2019 payout here, which was like June 6th is the full program, including a $10,000 to win, twin 25 features. There was June 7th, there was another $10,000 to win on twin 25 features. And then on June 8th, there was heats, B features, and then you got $125,000 to win the dirt late model dream. Now, I am not a dirt racing expert. So I don't understand how a lot of it works with like the G main and the B main and all this different stuff. I'm not a dirt racing guy by trade. I grew up watching asphalt racing. So it was fun trying to make a video about Dave Blaney's World of Outlaws championships. When you don't know anything about dirt racing, you're like, I hope that's a World of Outlaws car. So
yeah. Because there's many different variations of sprint car racing. That's a very good point, Mark. I forgot which event technically is this the sanctioning body of this event. This isn't a World of Outlaws event, to be clear. And that's a good point to make too. Like events like the Dream are just events that are put on by a promotion or region or a sanctioning body, and they invite so many people to come out, and you just have to basically, I guess, the rules and regulations are more or less put in place by the track. So you have to meet the track's guidelines, not a series guideline. I'm pretty sure if there is a certain sanctioning body that they'll have regulations in place that you must meet, but normally it's dependent on the track too, which is crazy. So I feel like with that, you have such a bigger turnout, and these races draw in so many drivers. I wish we had stats on that. Of course, we can look it up. How many drivers, attempted the Dream last season.
In 2001, the event was actually replaced by the rescheduled Eldora Million, which paid an unprecedented $1 million to winner Donnie Moran. Not sure how much he actually ended up with once the IRS got their part of it, but he got to tell people he won $1 million.
You throw that back into racing, man. What are you talking about?
It goes right back into my race team. It's very important.
Exactly.
What are you doing with your stimulus check? Buying race parts.
That's what's crazy when I hear like all these big money races. I'm just thinking like, man, that person just can blow all that money back into the racing budget. I mean, no offense to probably a lot of them, but that's honestly an economically sound thing to do. Invest back into the investment of the racing program. But of course, you got to treat yourself too. So I another thing about this event, specifically the Dream, Scott Bloomquist is probably the king of the Dream. He's won this event 8 times. And it shows just how great of a driver he is, specifically in the dirt late model ranks. Scott Bloomquist has always been a name that's popped out to me whenever I watch an event. I always take notice of him just because he's just very prominent in that division of motorsports. And actually, fun fact about the Eldora Million, it was just a 1-year event. So it's crazy how it was just one time they did that event. Maybe they didn't have another $1 million to give up the next season.
Yeah, there was like, you're like, hey, that's a lot of money, and like I feel like the same amount of people would show up to win $100,000. So why don't we just take a 0 off? No one will notice, and it'll be great.
Yeah, though for everyone, the Dream was running before the $100,000, the $1 million race in 2001. It was just a 1-year, one-off event where they kind of did that. So now that we know more about the Dream, let's kind of jump into a bit of the Prelude, and kind of give a little more history about the Prelude. As we've said, this is a charity race. It's an exhibition race, and the whole focus is about, giving back, and having fun, being relaxed. It's not a cup weekend or any other kind of weekend for a lot of these drivers. So they're more laid back and off guard. For the first couple of seasons of this event, from 2005 to 2008, the race specifically benefited the Victory Junction Gang Camp, as well as a variety of driver charities that were associated with the event. So drivers would obviously try to push their foundations while they're at this event. It's all about giving back and trying to get the most back and exposure from this time period. In 2008, Tony Stewart, after he won the Prelude, jumped out of his car and specifically said he would donate $1 million to the Victory Junction Gang.
He had one of those giant checks made up and everything.
Yep. And those are legit. You can go to the bank and cash them.
So, James, they
don't bounce.
Sidebar, have you ever been awarded a giant check in your life?
No, I have been awarded a lot of money once, and unfortunately it wasn't a giant check.
But I'm not talking about amount of money. Has anyone ever given you a large novelty check?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, you'd think it would have been a large novelty check, but it wasn't. And I'm surprised it wasn't. I feel like the novelty check is worth more because you get to keep that check and you put it somewhere and people see it and they're like, oh my gosh, where'd you get that? It's like, well, I won that in a closing house clearance event where they came to my front door and handed me this novelty check for $1 million. So, but I don't know. Mark, have you ever got a novelty check?
I have. So I was awarded a large novelty check. This is a fun story. It was for $3,000 Canadian, which is what, like $2,400 of your American dollars.
I'm not good at conversion.
But in 2013, my wife, my girlfriend at the time, and I were competing in this. It was a kind of, what's the competition? It was a competition to find this key. It was like a search, and it was like a riddle thing where they put a riddle in the newspaper every day for 14 days to find this hidden key. And it was for where I lived at the time. Kitchener, Ontario has Oktoberfest every year in October. It's the second largest Oktoberfest in the world. And they do this big German festival, and leading up to it, you find this key. And if you find the key, it opens this box at the old train station downtown, whatever. It's just a symbol. And if you find the key, you get $3,000. So on the final day of clues, you get up at 3:30 in the morning to get the paper from the convenience store because they're the first people to get it. And you get the last clue, and then you're in the park with 1,400 other people searching for this key. And my wife found it. So we won $3,000. So it's funny because today we were cleaning out the base or the storage, and we found the plaque they give you. We didn't get to keep the giant check; it was just for a photo op. But I have
those giant checks must be expensive.
Was once awarded a giant check, so that's pretty cool. Way off topic, but I had to plug that because I'm still super proud of it.
Oh, giant checks. So in 2009, the Prelude of the Dream probably handed a giant check to 4 various military organizations, Fisher House Foundation, Intrepid Fallen Heroes Fund, Operation Homefront, and the Wounded Warriors Project were all donated to through this race. And that's kind of crazy how it kind of makes this transition. Obviously, year to year, the title sponsors do change in this race. it's interesting to see that in the first few seasons, the race was specifically all about Victory Junction Gang Camp, a charity that I always love to contribute to. It's a great organization. And then it transitions to a bunch of military organizations, which is a very important issue to always address, what's going on with our active military and our non-active military members and how they're doing, because they obviously give us the ultimate sacrifice. And then through 2010, the race started to focus more on healthcare facilities,
children's hospitals,
Cincinnati.
mostly.
Yeah. Mainly children's hospitals. Mark, you want to go through them all?
Yeah, so in 2010, it was weird. So they split the drivers up into teams. So I think there was 6 drivers per team, I want to say. I think one might have had 7 because there's an odd number of cars. But there was the Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center, the Levine Children's Hospital, the Riley Hospital for Children, and the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Oh, sorry, no, there were 6 with 4 drivers each. Children's Healthcare of Atlanta and Children's Medical Center of Dallas. Oh, and the St. Louis Children's Hospital. I don't know what I'm talking about. They all benefit from the Prelude because they were all split into teams, right? And then I think they might have all ended up getting the same amount of money anyway. So
they might have. Probably whoever won. I forgot which. It was Jimmy Johnson who won. I forgot who was associated with his team. They might have got a little bit more because they won, but I'm not 100% sure either on that breakdown. I believe it was the same thing through 2011 with that. And in 2012, the title sponsor was Feed the Children. And it wasn't mainly a sponsor. It was mainly the title charity that they wanted to support was Feed the Children. And what was done was the money gained from the broadcast was donated to the foundation. And then Feed the Children sent food trucks to the hometowns of the top 10 drivers in the race. So another aspect of the competition kind of playing effects.
So it's like you better win or those children ain't getting any food, son. We play hardball here. All right, you better win.
Can you imagine if you're Carl Edwards, probably like at this time you got that Cheez-It sponsorship and like you finish 11th, do you just like get Kellogg's to help donate a bunch of food to Kansas, Missouri,
Wait, isn't Kansas City in Kansas? I remember the president saying that.
I think there's two Kansas cities, isn't there?
No, he was wrong. That was kind of what was funny about it. He's also the president of the United States, and he didn't know that. But moving right along, the Prelude apparently raised close to $4 million for charity in those 8 years. And I don't know if that includes the $1 million that Tony Stewart's group donated. Probably does. For $4 million in 8 years. That's a pretty good run. That's $500,000 a year in total for charity. So this was a really beneficial thing for everybody that they did this event. So, man, I missed the Prelude to the Dream. It was a lot of fun. And now, now these charities aren't getting any money because there's no charity dirt racing. So,
yeah, I know, man.
Should all be ashamed of ourselves.
We're hurting this kind of economy right now. So what also made the Prelude so cool was it was a single event.
Prelude to the Dream to benefit coronavirus. Let's do it, Tony. Come on. Let's go. Come on.
We'll do virtual Eldora.
Virtual Eldora to raise money for the families of victims of coronavirus. Brilliant. You heard it here first.
I think they already did that in iRacing, though.
And because we thought of it, you have to give us, what, $50,000 in free advertising? Okay, great.
Yeah, we at least get an entry. We get a car, at least.
Tony Stewart has to drive a flashback to the track car, and he's going to spend 99% of his time explaining to people what the hell that is. So...
you know what he's going to do? He's going to be like, I don't care. They put their logo on the car, and I just drive it, man. It'll drive the same way with or without that logo on the car. That's probably what he would say.
Pretty much, yeah.
So what's cool about this event, it raised $500,000 in like one day, basically. It was a one-day event. So the layout of this event was the drivers would get practice sessions in these hot lap sessions. So they would practice the cars in small groups in these hot lap sessions. After that, the drivers would then compete in a 2-lap qualifying session that would set the grid for a heat race. Now, those heat races would take the top 6 drivers from each heat race and advance them to the main. The rest would go to the B main. And from the B main, that would set the back half of the main starting grid. Now, those top 6 from each main were then, I believe it was the top 4. The top 4 from those heat races, the top 5, were taken and then inverted. So they would invert the top 6. So if you started 6th, now you're starting first. And now you've started first, you're starting 6th. And that's short track racing.
So it's almost as confusing as qualifying for the Daytona 500.
It's a little less confusing because it doesn't take as many days.
Yeah, so that was super confusing. If you followed any of that, basically there was all this qualifying that kind of like these B main races and heat races that all end up being pointless because everybody gets to be in the race at the end of the day anyway because it's for charity. So we're not gonna send anybody home from the Prelude to the Dream.
It kind of teaches a little bit about the structure of
it's an introduction to dirt racing for people who maybe don't watch dirt racing, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
And that's what's good about it is it does give a little taste of it, though. Yeah, everyone gets a participation award and gets to be in the A main.
It was way ahead of its time. Way ahead of its time. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there weren't that many cars. If you actually look at the event itself, I believe 2010 had the most cars with 28 cars featured in the A main, but I believe only 26 started the A main, which was another thing about that race. Even though you made the A main, didn't mean you necessarily started because all this racing was grueling and it wore on the car. You're running on someone else's car, and you're running a very physical form of racing too, where there's contact. A lot of cars got wadded up in these events. A lot of drivers were able to continue on with their wadded cars. So it's kind of crazy to see the carnage too that was involved with such a fun event.
And these were like classic sprints too. So the feature race is only 30 laps, but cautions don't count. So there isn't even caution stats like on Racing Reference because they don't count. So it doesn't matter how many cautions there are. There has to be 30 green flag laps. Is there green flag checker or green white checkers though? Probably not, right?
I don't. They might have incorporated it because if
caution flags don't count, then the race can't end under caution, right?
Exactly. So it'll never end under caution. At least what there would be is a 1-lap shootout. So, and that's the thing. Caution flags don't count. So it's like every time there's an incident, it's just like, well, restack them and rack them and go, which is just pure racing. And that's what's cool about this kind of racing is it's pure racing. So let's look at the history, too, of this event as far as winners of the Prelude. Now, Mark, we didn't get to watch the first two.
Because they were not on TV. But we do have stat sheets, right?
So. We have stat sheets, so we can refer back to them. Yeah. So let's kick it off. Who won the first one in 2005?
Well, the Herminator himself, Kenny Wallace, in a field of only 14 cars. Kenny Wallace.
Very short field.
Took home the first Prelude. Tony Stewart finished second. Danny Lasowski finished third in that race. And Kyle Petty raced in that one. He finished 13th. So
yeah,
that was
he got out there and had some fun. He put his ponytail back up and put the helmet on.
Jeff Green was in that one. Mike Wallace. So
the first one was really interesting because it was like a really eclectic mix of Cup drivers. Of course, you have Ron Capps and Cruz Petragon in there too, but.
Ron Capps, man. Ron Capps will drive anything. He's a NHRA driver, but man, if you give him an opportunity to go for fun, race another series, Ron Capps is down. He doesn't care.
Oh yeah, he's hardcore in iRacing right now too. So if you're ever watching an iRacing stream, you'll probably find Ron Capps iRacing. And honestly, these were his only other ventures outside of drag racing were running the Prelude. It's kind of interesting about this guy. He makes his living running a quarter mile at a time, but he loves to run circles every now and then.
In 2006, it's not even really fair because he's got home field advantage. Tony Stewart took the win in the race at Eldora. Go figure. But good old man Dave Blaney finished second, and he actually Tony Stewart passed him right near the end of the race to win that race.
Yeah, 2 to go. Yeah,
and Dave Blaney's the man. Ron Capps finished fourth in that race.
Ron Capps flexing his muscle, and that was exciting. And to me, that race was always brought up because they always showcased the last 2 laps and how Stewart caught Blaney, passed him, and went for the win. They always advertised that event, and to me, that hyped up the event a little more going into 2007, which would be the first one that would a lot of people would be able to enjoy because it was the first one on pay-per-view. Nextel took over the title sponsorship and. Also, basically, invited everyone from the Nextel Cup Series to come out. You had a lot of prominent names from the Cup Series, including rookie contender Juan Pablo Montoya came out to run some dirt cars. Man,
2007 was like when it blew up because it was on TV.
Yeah.
It was like all the Cup drivers were there. Guys that had never raced dirt before. Jeff Gordon, Kyle Busch, Clint Boyer, guys that had never done it. David Rudiman showed up. Mark Martin, guys that just were not used to it. And of course, Juan Pablo Montoya, like obviously it's sick.
Well, David Rudiman actually is from dirt racing.
Oh, is he? Well, I'm an idiot.
No, it's okay. Not a lot of people know about his family. His family in Florida is dirt racing family.
I know they're from Zephyr Hills, which is a brand of water. So
you get it from the ground.
Yeah,
we're just depleting the ground earth. But it's owned by Nestle. So there's more pressure on David at that point. Jeff Gordon, at this time, when he came to run the Prelude, this was the first time he was back in dirt since he ran sprint cars before he went to NASCAR.
Yeah, so it had been a long time since he'd been in a dirt car.
Oh, yeah.
And he'd never, I don't think he'd never run a dirt late model before. Probably not, right? Yeah.
No. Kyle Busch had run a little bit of dirt, but he never ran a dirt late model. And it was very young in his career, too. So, like, for a lot of these guys, like you said, they're not acclimated at all with this style of racing, especially this car. So there's a big learning curve for everybody in the field. Except for, I think, probably one of my favorite competitors throughout the Prelude, Clint Boyer. Clint Boyer grew up dirt racing. I believe he raced dirt late models, too, before he went and signed with Richard Childress Racing. And he was fast in 2007. He drove that Jack Daniels late model, and it was so cool. And that was the other cool thing about 2007, too. That was the first year they took all the cars and made them look like the Cup cars to help that identification for the viewers to be like, oh, there's Clint Boyer, there's Tony Stewart, there's Jeff Gordon.
Including like adding stickers to the front to make the nose look like the Dodge Charger or something. It just looked so bad. Like, it was so
Blaney's
stupid.
was the worst because he had a Chevy nose, and it's like, dude, he drives a Toyota.
Yeah. But you know what? I don't think Juan Pablo Montoya technically drove a Pontiac in this race. So
he drove a GTO.
And so did Ryan Newman. So I don't think their normal manufacturer partners were like, you have to drive a Dodge or a Toyota Sprint, a dirt late model in this weird kooky Wednesday night race. I think it was fine with,
maybe some. I don't know. And then also with 2007 too, one thing that always stood in my head about this event was Carl Edwards being involved in it. I think it was 2006, if I'm not mistaken. He was injured in a dirt late model accident. He was just running a local Wednesday night or Tuesday night event and got into an accident and hurt his thumb. And from that point, he stopped doing extracurricular racing outside of, the NASCAR Busch Series. So that was kind of interesting to see him back in a dirt late model because at that time he kind of like swore it off for a bit. So you had like a lot of great talented people here. In the end, the win came down to probably one of the most like epic finishes in the Prelude. It was 3 drivers under a blanket coming to the line. Carl Edwards edges out a side-by-side battle between Kyle Busch and Jeff Gordon, where Busch barely beats out Gordon. It was just a great finish. 3 guys I didn't expect to kind of be at the end. I always thought Boyer was going to win it, but just Edwards was strong that day. Jeff was really good in the car. It's good to see him back. Obviously being a fan of his, you wanted him to see him win. And then Kyle Busch, to me, had the coolest looking car because he had the electric visual paint scheme on his dirt late model. And I always liked that company. They make sunglasses. It's a very obscure sunglass company. They used to sponsor Bam Margera back in the day, and they also sponsor Kyle Busch. Yep. So that's my random fact for that one. So that was the 2007 edition. In 2008, there was a new title sponsor, and it made us spell really fresh, Mark.
Old Spice, bud. I use Old Spice deodorant right now. I have some on right now. That's what I use.
Oh yeah,
Old Spice.
I've used Old Spice since 2005, and that was before they look cool on a NASCAR. So Old Spice, if you want to sponsor us, please write to the address below. And
this is the best Prelude of all of them because Robbie Gordon finishes second. So Robbie Gordon had never raced a dirt car before in his life before this race. Now, granted, Robbie Gordon has won the Dakar He's won stages in the Dakar Rally. He's won the Baja 500, the Baja 1000. He's won
the Mint 400.
Mint 400. Score championships in like stadium trucks, but he's never raced a dirt late model on an oval track. So, and of course, he did what Robbie Gordon does: showed up and was fast immediately and finished second. And he almost ran Tony Stewart down, but I think it would have been tough for him to get by Stewart. Stewart's like a pro with this, and Tony Stewart led all 30 laps in this race and won it. But man, Robbie had a good time. He drove a Bloomquist car in that race, and he said Scott Bloomquist on the radio helped him a lot, telling him what line to run in certain places because he wasn't sure what to do. But I remember that one being really fun. It was a good race. And Ray Evernham ran in that race as well. He came out of retirement to run. We had Eric Almirola, like Dave Laney again, Casey Kane, Bobby Labonte, Mark Martin, Billy. Everybody was in this one too. So that was a really cool prelude.
Yeah, to me, like, it was cool because, like, if you look even back to 2007, like, Evernham, that was his first, like, race. And he was like, oh, man, I just want to survive around all these, Cup guys. And it was kind of intimidating for him. And you see him, like, in this one, he really steps up his game. And he's, like, competitive with a guy like Bill Elliott, who's running his own cars. And you start to see that more with these drivers. There's more drivers with their own equipment and taking this event seriously. And it's a good event because, like, Bloomquist, for example, he's, like, on the back straightaway trying to tell Robbie to go higher, like literally on the track during a caution period, just pointing at where Robbie should be running. You would never see that in any other form of race. So it just showed us like how competitive it was, but it was still a very fun event and a very entertaining race too. Yeah, Tony Stewart led every lap, but still there was excellent battles throughout the field, and the production value from every edition of this event continued to escalate higher and higher, and it got better. So, it was just only get better as 2009 came around. But unfortunately, with 2009 came the rains.
Yes, this race was postponed until September 9th due to rain. So a few months later, they had to run it on a time when everybody was free. So fortunately, it got pushed back. A new title sponsor, though, the 2009 Gillette Young Guns Prelude to the Dream. Remember the Gillette Young Guns? It was like this really cringy
We're technically
thing.
We're still Gillette Young Guns,
Yeah, I know.
As long as you're under 30.
Exactly. Man, there was guys that were like 37, 38 years old who were like Gillette Young Guns. And I was like,
Who?
Wasn't Tony Stewart one of them?
No.
I could have swore he was.
Junior was for a few seasons. And
Newman was.
Then he kinda,
Newman was like 30-some when he was a Gillette Young Gun.
No, I don't think he. I felt like that was a stipulation in the Young Guns was we wanted them under 30, so that's why.
All right. Well,
but I don't know
because
Jimmy Johnson was an older guy too, so I don't know. But
so that's the point. Tony Stewart wins again.
Yeah.
Tony Stewart wins again, but we got the debut of Marcus Ambrose on dirt, so that was pretty cool to see him come and do it. And dirt racing's huge in Australia. They have all kinds of dirt racing over there.
Australia, New Zealand. Over there specifically, it's huge. I wonder if he ever ran anything on dirt before this, because I know wing sprint cars are big over there. I don't know if like late models are, but like sprint cars too. So I don't know if he ever tried it or whatever. But it was great to see him in this. Put a little more international flair. Yeah, TK in this race, Tony Kanaan bringing some IndyCar flair, which was really cool to see because it's like a guy that like gets out of a car and goes to an engineer and a strategist and talks to them and has a debrief, and you get out of a car in a sprint like a dirt late model. It's like, what do you talk about? Like, how do you really set up the car any better? Like,
am I blind? I don't see Tony Kanaan here on this sheet.
Oh, was he not in 2009? I think it was 2010. Excuse me, that he came.
Well, either way, still having Tony Kanaan in a dirt race is dope.
Yeah, it's to me that's like kind of crazy how the event escalated to have like IndyCar drivers come in. I wish there were more IndyCar drivers that would have come, but I don't know. Maybe today it'd be different. Maybe more drivers would be open, but I don't know. Sometimes team owners don't want to.
I think guys are more afraid to do it now because of that, right? They're concerned that if they get injured or something like that, But it depends what your contract says. In 2010, It was Gillette as the sponsor again, but it was the Gillette Fusion Pro Glide Prelude to the Dream. Because we had to have like a massively long sponsor name because it's like a bowl game, So this one though, Tony Stewart doesn't win.
No, someone else people didn't like won, unfortunately. Jimmy Johnson.
7-time. Good old 7-time. Leads every lap and wins this race from the pole. So.
Well, I think he's 4-time at this point. So 4-time's a little upset. He won the pole, led all the laps, had a really cool paint scheme, tributing for Father's Day. It's kind of cool to see that. And it was just really cool to see like a super excited young Jimmy Johnson conquering this kind of form of motorsports. Another guy who came from a dirt background with desert off-road racing and short course racing, coming over to NASCAR, and then now doing this well. 2011, I think that's probably one of the most popular wins, because Clint Bowyer finally wins the Prelude to the Dream. One of the most competitive guys, very influential in dirt model racing because he is an owner. He brings his cars. He runs really well, and he takes it very seriously. And finally, he wins the Prelude to the Dream in 2011. Very competitive one as well. And it's just another stacked field.
The GOATs in this race, too. He was in 2010, too.
Yeah.
Ricky Carmichael.
Yeah.
So one of the greatest forgotten NASCAR drivers. But, man, Ricky Carmichael, the GOAT. We saw him at Daytona this year. He was at the Daytona 500. Walking around, just hanging out.
Plugging.
Just being a baller.
Plugging the Supercross thing, He's got to work with Daytona.
Marcus Ambrose, again, lots of cool guys in this race as well. And Tony Kanaan for his 2nd time. In a Honda. Technically, he was in a Honda for this race. So that's pretty cool.
And then finally, 2012, the final Prelude. An extra 10 laps were added to the main, which was the only change. So it was a 40-lap main, but it was not 40 laps enough to hold back Kyle Busch, who would win the Prelude to the Dream. And everyone would talk about how Kyle Busch was racing 3 wide by himself, which is kind of funny. He was always very competitive in these dirt model races, and he finally takes home a victory to be in the final one. I think that was big for Kyle Busch. Nice feather in the cap to say, hey, I won this one. I think that's a big thing. This is a very interesting bragging rights event for a lot of drivers. There wasn't a big trophy or anything prestigious on the line. It was to say, hey, I was better than you in that dirt late model. And it's kind of a cool thing to be a part of. And that's a big reason why a lot of the car owners participated by giving their cars and donating their efforts to this event. It was all about being a part of something bigger than racing. It was a very big moment just for humanity, basically, to show a softer side of these drivers and of the sport.
And that's basically a rundown of every season of every race of the Prelude and kind of how things went. But now we're going to go in kind of after the fact, even though we already talked about them. We're going to go into our favorite segment of the show, Strange Starters. So there were very strange starters in the Prelude. There were quite a few.
Oh, yeah.
Some stranger than others, but we'll go down the list. Obviously, I'm going to start with Robbie Gordon because Robbie Gordon's the GOAT, and he's my favorite driver ever. Say what you want about him, but he's my favorite driver. And yeah, obviously finished 2nd in 2008 in his first ever dirt race, which was sick. Ran again in 2009, didn't have as good a luck, but it's cool to see him go. He drove Operation Homefront car in 2009, which was Jim Beam's military charity that they supported. Ran a Operation Homefront paint scheme multiple times in the Cup Series. And then who's our next train starter, James?
Oh, the next one on the list. It's a good one. How about Red Farmer? Legendary Red Farmer. I believe it was in his 70s, basically, when he was competing in the Prelude from 2005 to 2009. Just an iconic staple of racing history. I believe in a member of the Alabama gang, if I'm not mistaken, for Red Farmer. But he's also a very influential, short track racer, and I think that's a big aspect to note here is that it was such an eclectic mix of drivers. You had a veteran like Red Farmer, and then you had track owner Tony Stewart, and then whoever won the Cup race last weekend. It was really great to see that in this field, and odd to see Red Farmer in this field. So definitely a strange starter.
And then we have the more successful on paper Gordon brother, Jeff Gordon. Our favorite brothers who aren't brothers. Jeff Gordon, man, he ran it in 07, 08, and 2010. Obviously had that 3rd place finish in 2018. 2010, was it? The one Kyle Busch won, right?
2007.
2007, he finished third. And that was
Yeah.
cool, man. Ran that DuPont paint scheme and everything, so that was sick to see him out there and just doing something he hadn't done in so many years, you know. So cool to have a superstar of the sport show up and run this charity dirt race.
Yep, and that was what it was, a superstar. Next is a superstar in another form, drag racing form, Ron Capps. Now, Ron is definitely interesting because, like we said before, he never ran anything else outside of drag racing except for the Prelude. But he is really a good circle track racer. Always had a blast and was very successful. I think he had a couple top tens in the Prelude, but never was the serious contender up front. Though he had a lot of fun, brought his own car, and just was a great addition to the race because you had a drag racer, different perspective, a different audience tuning in to this event.
And then next up we have Cruz Pedregon. So Cruz Pedregon is interesting. He's interesting in the fact that I don't know anything about him. So Cruz Pedregon, if you look him up on iRacing, his only stats are the 6 Preludes that he ran. So do you know anything about Cruz Pedregon, James?
Cruz Pedregon is of the Pedregon brothers of Funny Car Racing. Cruz, you know him in the Advanced Auto Parts car. Had Advanced Auto Parts on his ride. Competed from 2007 2012 in the Prelude. Always was a fan of him. When I liked drag racing when I was in my teen years, like the Pedregon brothers were my favorite 2 funny car drivers, and I loved funny car racing. To me, that's like the most extreme kind of drag racing. All of drag racing is extreme, but funny cars are just crazy. And to see Cruz in this event to me was great because I was a fan of his, so I always would cheer for him. But it was great to see him outside of drag racing and also to be competing in his own cars. He was another one of these drivers that actually brought his own cars to the Prelude.
Should I feel bad for not knowing who that is? I should feel bad.
No, it's okay. Right? It's just drag racing. It's like most people don't know. You know who Don the Snake Perdone is?
Nope.
There, so you don't. Do you know who Don Schumacher is?
Nope. I've been to one drag racing event in my life, and it's a drag track near my house. So.
Do you know John Force?
Yes, I know who John Force is. Yes.
Then you're fine.
Good.
You know everything about drag racing.
Perfect. Ricky Carmichael is the GOAT, and he's the next strange starter. So we were talking about Ricky. Obviously, he's a Supercross multi-champion, came to NASCAR for a bit. Unfortunately, never managed to win a truck race in his career with KHI and Turner, but, you know, it is what it is. We like watching Ricky race. I thought I thought every time he was out there and he got a top 10, I'm like, that's, like, amazing because this is not what he does at all. Like, he's a motocross driver.
Yeah, and to start so late in his career, too. I mean, how old was he? He was in his 30s, probably.
He was in his 30s, I believe, yeah.
When he made that transition. So, late bloomer. I mean, like you said, Mark, I wish he would have had more success, but it was really great to see Ricky Carmichael in the sport because it brings new eyeballs into the sport. And also for him to participate in an event like this.
Next up, Kyle Petty.
Next up, oh, man, our man, Kyle Petty. Country music singer extraordinaire.
Incredible.
Yes, incredible. Insert here. Only competed in one Prelude, 2005. And in that Prelude, Kyle Petty finished an astounding, drum roll please.
Last, I think, right?
No, 13th. I had to scroll a bit, but yes. Kyle
second
Petty
second last, I believe, yeah.
Out of 14 cars, driving the Victory Junction Gang Chevrolet. So, yeah. Kyle Petty, it was good to see him, though. It's good to see him participate in this event. And, for several years, he had the Victory Junction Gang camp participating as a charity partner as well. So that was great. Next up, your man, everyone's man.
Greatest crew chief ever, man, Ray Evernham. So
there you go.
Ray Evernham is the man. Obviously a team owner for years, was a crew chief in the sport for years. And for him to come out to do dirt racing was cool. Obviously he's married now to Erin Crocker, or as she goes, Erin Crocker Evernham. She's involved in dirt racing her whole career. Obviously tried NASCAR for a bit. So for him to go and do some dirt racing, it's sick, man. I don't know about his dirt racing history, if he did dirt racing in the past or things like that. I know he runs HSR events now.
A lot of historic racing, yeah.
Does a lot of historic racing, and man, like you see Ray, he just hangs out at the racetrack. I saw him at Michigan earlier this year in a media room, just hanging out, talking to people. So he's just a cool guy to be around, And there is, I believe, is there a dinner with racers with him? I think there is, and it's pretty interesting. I think that's what I was listening to, was a dinner with racers with him. It might have been something else, but
I mean. Well, go ahead. Finish.
Yeah, sorry. It is really interesting, and he's just got a cool career. Being Jeff Gordon's crew chief and all that. Obviously, we know the history. He was also Dick Johnson's crew chief. Did you know that? I should have mentioned that in the Strange Starters video. He was Dick Johnson's crew chief, which is pretty cool. It's a guy's real name, Dick Johnson.
That is a good name. He also was a ARCA mechanic back in the day. Good old Ray Evernham. And if you ever want to see what Ray's up to now, just check out the HSR page. Like, go on HSR, like Facebook or Twitter. And Ray is very hands-on. Like, you go up to him like during that weekend, like the social media people, and they go ask him technical questions, and he'll break things down for them. He's very easygoing and good with his time. Very nice guy.
And he's very active on Twitter. If you ask Ray questions on Twitter, he'll get back to you. He's very, very active on Twitter.
Yeah, can't say enough about him. And honestly, I think this might have been, like, for Ray Evernham, this might have been like the forte of him starting to drive again and get a driving kind of career out of his time in racing. Next up, I think this is, besides Robbie Gordon, our favorite strange star.
The man who needs no introduction.
But we need to give him one anyways. Juan Pablo
JPM.
Montoya.
JPM, one of the greatest race car drivers in the history of the world, who does not get enough respect.
Never will get enough respect until someone does something about it. It might be us. But Juan Pablo Montoya competed in the 2007 Prelude to the Dream. He finished 15th after starting 25th.
Mid-pack.
He started dead last in the pack and finished mid-pack.
Yeah.
Not bad for old JPM. And he beat out Denny Hamlin, Red Farmer,
that's right,
Ryan Newman. I don't know if he was running the original car or if it was any better, and Mike Wallace and Tony Stewart, who crashed. So take that. Juan Pablo Montoya beat those guys.
And next up, we have another kind of open wheel driver, Mr. Tony Kanaan. Tony Kanaan, we've mentioned him earlier. TK. He's obviously, man, how old is he now? And he's still racing Indy cars part-time, and he's doing iRacing and all kinds of stuff. He does Ironman triathlons and stuff.
He doesn't look like he's aged either, man. I mean, he's Brazilian skin don't crack.
And now he's going to get into broadcasting too. So he's going to start doing some broadcasting and stuff. So Tony Kanaan,
and it's kind of ironic because like always people like knocked him for like his accent. I'm like, come on, that's low hanging fruit. He's got a good voice.
And he's the 7-Eleven guy. He was always sponsored by 7-Eleven, which I thought was just an amazing sponsor. They were sponsored by 7-Eleven. And remember when he did that commercial with Kevin Harvick for Reese's Cups?
You got my caramel and my peanut butter. You got my peanut butter and my caramel.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Nostalgia,
sorry,
folks. Nostalgia. So yeah, Tony Kanaan, obviously he was never competitive. He finished at the back of the pack like each year he did it. But you know what? He was there helping raise money for charity. Next up, Awesome Bill from Dawsonville. The man competed in every single Prelude.
Bill Elliott. Yeah, Bill Elliott's like the only strange starter on our list other than Ray Evernham, who has competed in every one. Well, Ray came close. He missed 2. But Bill has competed in every one. Bill's best finish, he had a couple top 10s. And another thing about Bill is he ran his own cars. Bill Elliott made dirt late model cars and brought them to Eldora. And I don't mean he physically made them himself. He probably worked with other people to make the chassis, but they were Bill Elliott chassis. So that's a good one. Next up on our list, another guy that starts with a B, Brian Vickers.
Another guy who doesn't get enough credit. Great career.
Seriously doesn't. I hope he's still got something going on in his pipeline. But Brian Vickers competed in the 2010 Prelude to the Dream. He drove not a Red Bull car. He actually drove a Mike Lott sponsored number 55. It was during his Michael Waltrip tenure, I guess, or forte. I believe it was just before that.
He was still with Red Bull at the time.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting to see that. But the Klott connection obviously was due to his time off and making a new connection and trying to get more exposure to the condition that he suffered from that like basically took him out of the car for half a season. Anyways, Brian finished unimpressively in that race, if I'm not mistaken.
Which one was that? Oh, never mind. I lost it.
I thought it was 10, but I don't think it was
He
10.
finished. I have it right here. No, it was not 10.
Yeah, I think it's 11. Yeah, 11. He finished 14th in 11 in the number 83 clotcollect.org, number 83. So, solid, run, keep it mid-pack. But, yeah, Brian Vickers did get to compete in a Prelude to the Dream, even after his medical condition.
And next we have the only ever female competitor in the Prelude to the Dream, the one and only Danica Patrick, who fairly certain had done no dirt racing in her career. But she showed up in 2012 for the final one, ran the Prelude. Great to raise money for charity. This would have been before she was a full-time Cup driver as well. So
yeah, I believe this was when she was doing her part-time season with Stuart Haas. So I would believe that affiliation with Tony Stewart played a bit into her getting involved and participating in the event. So that's good to see that connection go and forge. But yeah, use that platform that she has and raise some money. Good for her.
She finished 15th in her only Prelude.
Not half bad.
And finally, we mentioned him earlier, we have Marcus Ambrose, the only ever Australian competitor in the Prelude to the Dream. Just cool to see him do it. Man, Marcus would race anything, he doesn't care. Like, he came to NASCAR, from supercars, never raced ovals before, won races, was very successful. Mm-hmm. Another guy that, I think is remembered for winning on road courses, but had a great career. Long career.
Overall.
Ran well on ovals, and great driver. And cool to see him come to the Prelude for 3 years. He ran the 47 Little Debbie car and then also ran a Stanley car when he drove for RPM. So cool to see him do that. But James wanted to make a note that there's one driver that we whose name we haven't mentioned, who never competed in a Prelude, that we're very sad to see never competed in a Prelude. And James, who is that?
Yeah, Dale Earnhardt Jr. never completed in the Prelude to the Dream. I'd really like to know that.
And he's close with Tony Stewart, or was.
Yeah.
For years.
I don't know if it's one of those things where Dale felt he couldn't get the time to go to the event, or if it was one of those events where he would really be able to, just be himself and relax, or if it was a stipulation where there was something in his contract where he could not go to an event like that and participate. I don't know. It'd be interesting to find out because, I would feel like Dale Earnhardt Jr. would like to participate in some dirt track racing like that for fun, go and hang out with Kenny Wallace and just run dirt late models with Tony Stewart. These are all his friends kind of in racing. Obviously he has more friends in life, but, it would have been cool to see him compete in the Prelude. But yeah, fun fact, Dale Earnhardt Jr. never competed in the Prelude to the Dream. Anyways, and another fun little section we like to put together where running your own car. Over the years, many drivers actually ran their own dirt late models like we have stated in the past. Here, we're going to go through them.
Well, it's a very short list. It's Bill Elliott, Cruz Pedregon, Clint Boyer, Bobby Labonte, and the Dillon brothers, Austin and Ty. Although, did they really own it? Or did their dad?
Technically it was Mike Dillon, but to their credit, they did participate in dirt late model races. And actually, I believe Austin and Ty might have both won races at the Talladega dirt track outside Talladega Speedway.
Austin Dillon won the inaugural Mudsummer Classic truck race at Eldora. So he won the first ever king truck race at Eldora. So
yeah, that's right. Suck it, Kyle Larson.
Yeah, that's right. In your face, Kyle Larson. We probably shouldn't talk about Kyle Larson anymore.
No,
that's kind of taboo now. People wanted Ganassi to change the number and everything.
That would have been wrong because honestly, that's Felix's number, man. You can't mess with that. But
exactly. But you know what? Let's not get into that.
He would have competed in the Prelude to the Dream. That's the only thing we're gonna say.
Definitely, he would have. Yes, for sure. Had they kept running it,
he would have.
And then there are 8 drivers that competed in all of them. You kind of alluded to that earlier. They are, James.
Tony Stewart, obviously.
Bill Elliott owns the track.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to compete in all of them. Bill Elliott, as we stated earlier, did compete in all of them. But here are the rest that you did not know. Kenny Wallace, Ken Schrader, Ron Capps, Dave Blaney, Bobby Labonte, and Clint Boyer.
And Ron Capps being the only non-NASCAR driver to compete in all of them.
Yep. Which is an astonishing fact. And honestly, what's funny too, Bobby Labonte, I don't know if you knew this, Mark, he actually owned a dirt late model team.
I did see his name listed as the owner of his car. I did see that, and I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, so that's why he had his own cars. He had a pretty competitive team for a number of years. I'm not sure if he still owns it. I don't know if it was him and Terry specifically that owned it, but yeah, I always thought that was interesting too, because it was one of those things I discovered when I was like watching Speed or Mav like years ago, just watching a race, and it was on, and it was kind of cool to see that participation from a Cup Series driver such as Bobby Labonte. But that was our look at the Prelude to the Dream. All 8 of them. We decided not to pick one because why? Why pick one when you can just look at all 8? And yeah, Mark, other than wishing that we had the ability to watch all 8 of these, what are your biggest takeaways from the Prelude?
My biggest takeaway is that was just good for charity, and also it was a great way, as we mentioned earlier, to introduce people to dirt racing. Like for me, it would have been the first dirt race that I ever watched. So, and maybe you catch that bug and you check other stuff out. So it was a cool way to promote dirt racing and just raise money for charity. That's really what my big takeaways are from the Prelude.
Yeah, definitely. It was a big moment to expose different people to dirt racing, and it did, obviously, with you, which was great. For me, it kept me in touch with it, which was great. I never tried to seek out dirt racing, and that's not because I didn't want to. It's just because it wasn't really that much of an interest to me. I did like to watch it when it was on, especially, events like the Knoxville Nationals on Speed and, bigger wing sprint cars events. But you never really got to see a lot of these, and it was really great to see this form of dirt racing, to see some of the best drivers that you saw week to week on this track, which it's funny to look at Eldora because it's kind of an interesting comparison to Dover, banking wise. It is the same amount of banking almost in the corner. I think it's the same amount of banking in the corners as Dover, and on the straightaways it's 1 degree less. So it's always like a constant turning track. It's a very hard, tough track. So that was always cool to me. It was always this allure of Eldora. I always felt like that spotlight was always put onto it, and always put that track on a pedestal for myself. But what was your favorite Prelude, Mark?
2008.
2008?
Robbie Gordon finished second. Like, what? You didn't have to ask.
Yeah.
Like what?
Yeah. If only he won the event, I think you would have called up the charities and been like, I donate all of my money.
100%. Robbie Gordon been right. I'd have been on that train, man. I'd been like, yeah, let's go. Robbie Gordon won the Prelude, showed people that he can still win in racing. So, man, I gotta make a video. I gotta do a video about my boy Robbie Gordon at some point. We'll see.
Yeah. The other interesting aspect too about this event, if it would have kept going, Mark, where do you think it would be? Do you think it would still be like the Eldora Prelude, or do you think it would be?
I think it would be just ridiculous. Like, I think it would be, there would be drivers lobbying to be in it. I think it would just be so bougie and so big now that it just wouldn't be what it was, which is the way it works. And it would be streamed online, and it would be expensive. It would be like $40 to watch it. It'd be a whole thing. And I'm glad that it's a thing in history that we can look back on. Like, I kind of look at it like IROC. Everyone's like, oh, they got to bring IROC back. I'm like, no, they don't. They really don't.
Yeah.
It's a great part of history, but we don't need to have it because they wouldn't do it right now. It would be way overthought, and it just, I don't think it would be good. So I'm glad that we had the Prelude. I think I'm happy with the not having it anymore as well. But, it's a cool thing to look back on. I think if they did it now, it would be too much. It would be over the top.
No, it's a good point. Everything has its place and time, and mainly that's what makes it so great is its place and time, and that timing in which it happened. Like you mentioned, IROC, it would never strike the same way that it did, and I don't think this event would kind of be the same. There would be a little bit more to it, and it would take away from the allure of it. It's great that it did happen, and we get to appreciate it and then look back on a lot of these events, and it's great to take away and maybe look towards in the future. If you want to have an exhibition event like this, it's definitely possible because this event grew year after year to have the audience not only at Eldora, but also, buying a pay-per-view. So to me, I don't think we should ever necessarily redo this exact event, but why not have another charity event where it has some aspect like this? But to me, the biggest and most integral part of this whole event, and they do not get enough credit, are the owners of all those other cars that lent them out to these drivers to participate in this event. They're competing for a chance at one of the biggest races on the schedule in the form of racing, and they're going to donate their car to someone who does not have any experience driving it at all, and just for the opportunity to participate in this event and to be associated with the event. To me, I think that's just so cool. You'll never see that, I think, again in racing. And yeah. I hope I'm proven wrong.
Yeah,
but to me, I think it's a time and place. It's all about timing, and it was perfect timing for that.
Agreed. Well, everyone, that is our look back at Tony Stewart's Prelude to the Dream. It was cool to talk about something that is NASCAR related, but not exactly NASCAR. I think we got to do some episodes coming up about get away from NASCAR again for a little bit. Talk about some other stuff.
Yeah, I like things like this. I wish there were more non-NASCAR drivers in this, but people, let us know in the comments below. What non-NASCAR things should we look at that aren't IROC?
Yeah, we've talked about IROC in the past. IROC always seems like a good idea, and then you watch the races and you're like, these aren't very good.
Yeah, because there's only so many drivers. Yeah, it does get in the way. We will do some IROC content though, like our longer or more streamlined videos though. I think we should revisit IROC, and that's probably one we'll definitely have to collaborate on because there's a lot of aspects of it. But we'd like to jump into this, or maybe even watch Race of Champions. I've always enjoyed those, especially
I love Race of Champions. It's always been a really cool event. But
yeah, those are always cool. But there's a lot of things we can look at, and we'll definitely try to scour through the internet.
But just a few housekeeping things before we go off. We have a new video on our YouTube channel about Dave Blaney. It's called Ultimate Underdogs. Dave Blaney. It will be a series. Dave Blaney is the first episode. Cool look back on his career. After publishing it, I think there's a couple things could have done a little bit better in terms of why he's an underdog, but it's an enjoyable video. I loved making it, so check it out. James, if you haven't seen his video on his top 10 or 10 of his favorite NASCAR commercials, check it out. It's a really well done video. James did a great job on it. And what do you have in the pipeline next? You said you were cutting up truck clips.
Yeah, I'm trying to work on a video right now about specifically the first truck race that happened in Texas, 1997. It was a big moment for the series, a very pivotal point for them, especially in one of their growing years in 97, and for specifically the truck market as a whole, going to one of the biggest truck markets in the country. It's a lot of interesting facts about that race, and can't wait to present that to the masses. I'm not sure if we should launch that on my channel or if I should go put it on our Flashback channel, because there's some pretty interesting points that we'd really just like to educate the masses with on that one. Also trying to work on maybe a Talladega video from the mid-90s, specifically talking about the horsepower dominance of Morgan McClure versus Robert Yates Racing. Very interesting aspect of that at the time. And I think that's a big thing too, Mark. A lot of our videos for this channel, they're very of the time. Things that
we're flashing
are
back.
Just moments.
We're flashing back, man. Also working on a new Strange Starters video. There will be another Strange Starters video hopefully out next week. I do have a lot of work to do next week, like real life work that pays money. So I have to do that. So it might be 2 weeks, but we'll see. So thanks for checking all that out. Thanks for subscribing to our podcast, watching the video version on YouTube. And once again, guys, if you know anyone who wants to give us some money to say their name a bunch of times and do their terrible ad read, we'd love to. So
we would make it the best ad read ever. It wouldn't be terrible. We would take it and make it terrific.
Fantastic. We will read whatever you want. We will promote whatever product you want. We are not, we don't discriminate. So thanks so much for listening. And guys, really appreciate it. I say guys. When I say guys, I mean people, by the way. I don't mean just
everyone.
Men. I mean, guys is a universal term. Folks.
Fuck men.
Human beings who listen to our podcast, animals, non-human beings who listen to our podcast. Thank you so much, and we will see you in the next episode.
Good night, all sentient futures.